Today on Boston Girl Bakes, I'm whipping up my favorite layer cake, a chocolate layer cake recipe, complete with a homemade chocolate buttercream frosting. Growing up, there was only one cake that I requested for my birthday, and that was a chocolate cake, and it had to have chocolate frosting. But growing up in the 80s and 90s meant that my birthday cake always came from a box. No shame in my mom's game, but let me tell you, there's nothing that beats a homemade cake. And if you're new to baking and a little intimidated by making your own cake from scratch, I really think a chocolate cake is the perfect cake to try out first. It's an oil-based cake, which means you don't need to use a mixer. You don't need to worry about the proper temperature of butter creaming with the sugar. It's a much more forgiving cake to start out with. And there's a few secrets that I have for you that I'm going to share with you to make the best homemade chocolate cake. To start, we want to preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and you want to position a rack in the center of your oven. In a large mixing bowl, whisk together the flour, sugar, cocoa powder, baking soda, baking powder, and your salt. The first secret I have for you when you're making a chocolate cake is we're going to use Dutch cocoa powder. This is different than your natural or unsweetened cocoa powder. It's going to be less bitter in flavor, and I think it just makes for a more chocolatier tasting cake. If you are in the store and you're not sure what that means, if you're looking for the typical brand you'll probably see, which is Hershey's, they call it special dark cocoa. And it does react differently with your baking powder and baking soda than it does with natural cocoa powder. So for this cake, make sure you're grabbing Dutch cocoa powder or Hershey's Special Dark and not a natural cocoa powder. Then in a second mixing bowl, you're going to whisk together your oil, eggs, vanilla, and sour cream. We're simply going to then stir the dry ingredients into the wet mixture just until the last of the flour is mixed in. You want to make sure not to keep mixing at this point once the last of the dry ingredients have been mixed in. The more you mix, the tougher the cake is going to be in the end. Then you're going to stir espresso powder into boiling water and then stir that boiling water into your chocolate batter. Adding espresso powder into our chocolate cake is going to really enhance the flavor of the chocolate. You're not going to taste the espresso powder, but it's my secret for making a chocolate cake taste really extra chocolatey, so don't skip it. Once you stir the boiling water in, you're going to find that the batter is really thin. Don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. This is exactly what it's supposed to be like. Then go ahead and divide the batter between your cake pans, and you're going to bake them for 30 to 35 minutes until a toothpick inserted comes out clean. Then go ahead and remove the cakes from the oven, and you'll want to let them cool for about 5 minutes and then turn them onto a wire rack to cool. Of course, no chocolate cake is complete without frosting, and I have to have chocolate frosting on my chocolate cake. Growing up, I actually hated frosting, but then I realized it was that fact that I hated canned frosting. It's really simple to make with just a few ingredients, and it just blows, I think, any canned frosting out of the water. To start by making our frosting, we're going to beat together our softened butter. We're going to beat that first to soften and lighten it up a bit before we add in our powdered sugar. Then you want to add in your powdered sugar about a ½ cup at a time on low speed. Make sure to add your powdered sugar a little bit at a time on a low speed. Otherwise, you're going to end up with powdered sugar all over your kitchen. Ask me how I know. One trick I have for you is to actually take a towel, or you can use a wet paper towel, and place it around the top of your mixer to cover it while it's mixing in the powdered sugar. That way it doesn't end up all over your kitchen. Once the powdered sugar has been mixed in, you can add in your heavy cream and vanilla. The heavy cream is going to make for really rich frosting, but of course you can swap it out and use milk if that's what you have on hand. And then go ahead and add in your cocoa powder. For the frosting, you can use either natural cocoa powder or a Dutch cocoa powder. I'm going to use Dutch cocoa powder since I already used it for the cake, and that's what I have on hand. But you really can use either or. I do like using, again, the Dutch cocoa powder. I just think it makes for a richer, more chocolatier tasting frosting. And here's my last secret for you to get a really light and fluffy frosting. You want to mix this frosting for a really long time. It's going to add a lot of air into the frosting. It's going to make for such a light, fluffy, airy frosting that just is like a cloud in your mouth. It's amazing. So I mix it on a high speed for about 5 to 6 minutes. And you're going to see it start to lighten in color and become really airy, and it just becomes such a beautiful frosting that you're going to be hard pressed not to eat it without a spoon. Once your cakes are cooled, you can go ahead and then frost your chocolate cake. And and it's ready to enjoy. This chocolate cake is one of my favorites. I love it and request it for my birthday every year. I hope if you're new to baking cakes that this recipe is giving you the confidence to try out making a cake from scratch on your own. And if you make this recipe, I'd love to hear how it went for you in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss another baking tutorial. And until next time, happy baking.